Imam Sahib? And Sadar Sahib? No, Swami Sahib, please. Have you finished with formalities? Yes, please.
Huzur. Huzur, we have 75 guests and about 20 questions. 75 guests, about 20 questions have been presented. I'll read out the first question. This question is from Mr. Alan Burke from Ealing. Mr. Burke? Mr. Burke's question is, how can interreligious activities be directed towards the betterment of humanity in general?
This question, I think, is a bit involved in the sense that different people react differently if religious activities are directed towards them. Religious activities are an individual's affair mainly, or those individuals which are governed by a system and organization, like in the case of Ahmadiyyat, are not the general rule. But he is asking about religious activities as such. So in my opinion, most of the people who preach to others are not directed. They do it by themselves, and that's what I think. Or if they are directed, I doubt if they are individually directed by the community, which is the case in Jamaat Ahmadiyya. We take care that every person who preaches our views, our religious views to others, preaches them in a very special manner. So I can relate to you that instruction, from which you can infer your own conclusions. I always direct Ahmadis to convey the message to others with the conviction that it is good for them, number one. But do not call them to Islam as such. As Allah directs us in the Holy Quran, you always call them towards Allah, that is God, which is a common factor, common to all religious activities. So whenever you begin preaching others by inviting them to Islam, there is bound to develop a counter-resistance. And your preaching will become by that much difficult. But when you call towards Allah, that is God, at least those people who believe in Him will be attracted to this message, yes, and they can say, we also believe in Him and our activities are directed, are oriented towards Him. So then the discussion can begin and you can tell them that our approach to Allah is easier and more rational. Now, this will be the beginning of a dialogue which will not be based on antagonism. That would be based on a mutual effort to reach a common goal. So this is how I advise Ahmadis, and I hope you will take your lesson from this, and everyone who belongs to any religious denomination should follow this course, which I believe is better. Have you been answered properly? Thank you.
This question is from Mr. Bill Simpson from Birmingham.
Yes.
His question is...
Who is Mr. Bill Clinton, you said?
Simpson, Bill Simpson.
I'm glad it's not Clinton. Yes, please. Thank you. Okay.
I am at the crossroads. My religion is Church of England. What can you say to me to convince me that your religion is the road for me to take?
My religion is?
Church of England.
No. How can I say what? My religion is what? What should I tell him? What is the last bit of the question?
What can you say to me to convince me that your religion is the road for me to take?
That question has been only partially answered already. The fact is that I believe that Islam, as we understand Islam, is a universal religion. And it can appeal to the human conscience everywhere in the world. While, as I believe Christianity to be understood today, it cannot be considered universal. That is the first point which you should settle with us. If I prove my case that Islam is universal in its appeal, while Christianity is not universal in its appeal, though to look at it appears to be a bitter contest between us, but I'll explain it is not bitter at all. Christianity, when it began, it differed with its religious view from the previously held views in Judaism. And also it differs even today with all the religious beliefs held elsewhere in the world, because no one believes in other religions that God gave birth to a son, and that son took the burden of all people's sins, provided they believe in him. Now, this view is not shared by most so-called divine religions. And the second, more difficult part is that when you invite them to Christianity, they will have to abandon their previously held views and their previously held religious leaders whom they hold in honor and reverence. For instance, a Hindu cannot join a Christianity unless he abandons Krishna and Rama and whoever he considers to be a man of reverence, or the so-called God of reverence. He will have to abandon all of them and then turn to Jesus. The same is true of Sikhs, the same is true of Buddhists and all other religious denominations. Now, this is the major difference between Islamic approach and Christian approach. Islam emphasizes the fact that God sent true prophets or messengers to all the people of the world, and at all times. As such, when a Hindu is approached by a Muslim, he will not have to abandon Krishna or Rama. He will only have to understand them in the within the framework of Islamic understanding, which will not sever his ties from his reverend leaders, but will give them a new meaning. That part I will explain further, and then perhaps you'll understand. Krishna is understood to be a God incarnate by many Hindus, while Islam believes that Krishna was only a messenger of God. So as far as his ties of love and reverence with Krishna are concerned, they will not be severed when he accepts Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They will only be given a new meaning. which is far more rational. And this goes for every religion. So in this way, I believe that Islam is the right faith for anyone who is in search of a universal religion. Now there I must clarify that I'm not representing the Islam of so-called fundamentalists. They're fundamentally different from what I have said. They fundamentally differ from what I have said. What I have said, I am presenting a universal God in which the message has to be conveyed with very special care, with persuasion and love, not with the help of terrorism, not with the help of sword or any weapons. So as such, I believe there's this appeal of Ahmadiyyat is universal in nature and is rational in nature, and as such, it should appeal to the conscience of every person in the world. Thank you.
This question is from Lucy Clark from Fulham. She's a student.
Yes, please.
What is the Ahmadiyya view on evolution?
On evolution?
Yes.
Ahmadiyya view is based on the Quran. And the Quranic view is that the Quran does not reject evolution at all. In fact, it positively supports the idea of evolution, but an evolution which is directed evolution, which is organized evolution. And on this subject, I have written volumes in this book which is lying over here, and it's impossible for me to develop this theme further. The difference is that the so-called Darwinists believe in a haphazard evolution which got its origin from nothing, from no conscious being, no organizer. As such, if you accept this view, according to their own beliefs, according to their own scientific understanding, such an evolution should have led to the creation of man for a period of, say, trillions of years. Because if only chance directed the steps of evolution, then it should have taken much greater time, so great a time that cannot be attributed to the origin of this universe. So all these things are discussed in detail. I have discussed the theory of genes. How can gene control things while they are deprived of any conscious mind? But they control things in a manner as though they were conscious. And they create things which they cannot create because they are creative forces within set laws. And evolution requires influences which are outside their control. So these are rather involved matters. That is why I apologize in the beginning that it will be very difficult for me to explain all these things here in this short sitting. So if you get hold of this book and show patience to read it through, I'm quite sure that all your questions will be satisfactorily answered in this book. Thank you. You can. Who is the Ahmadi girl who brought you with? You better buy one and present her as a gift, right?
A question from Dr. Nasser Ahmad Khan from Telford in Shropshire. Dr. Khan's question is in two parts. The First part is the Holy Quran acknowledges the existence of extraterrestrial life.
That's right.
What is the shape or form of this life?
Of that life.
Yes.
Yes.
And the second part?
Yes, second part, please.
Maybe related to the earlier question, does this argument of the Quran negate the theory of natural selection by Charles Darwin?
The theory of natural selection
by Charles Darwin
is true as well as wrong. It is true that the nature selects whatever is best suited to a given time. This is true. But it has no mind, no eye, no ear, no design. So that is the problem, basic problem with the natural theory of natural selection. But as far as your question, fundamental question is concerned, I don't know which verse you referred to when you said that according to the Quran, there are living beings in other extraterrestrial bodies. Where did you pick it up? From us, right. Thank you. Yes. Because I was wondering, this is an idea which is not presented generally by others. The fact is that Holy Quran categorically states that there is a form of life which exists in extraterrestrial bodies. And the Holy Quran categorically mentions that life to be dabba, that of dabba. Now, I think I have explained the word dabba literally in Arabic. And there it is used literally in the Quran. Dabba cannot apply to any form of life which is marine in nature. Dabba cannot apply to any form of life which has wings to fly with. Dabba applies only to those forms of life which creep along the earth's surfaces, dry land. So the Holy Quran has already explained that the form of the life which the Quran refers to is that of those living beings which, like humans, walk along the earth's surfaces or move along the earth's surfaces. Walking is one mode of travel, that's all. So that shows the possibility of the living who are like us, but who may not be like us at the same time. Because life can take many forms, like life in a metallic form. The difference between robot and life is that robot are fed ideas into them. They cannot think by themselves of their own. Their limitation is what man feeds into them. They cannot cross that limitation. But life is a wonderful thing. Life can think of different things, it can take different courses, and there it is free. So the Quran refers to that form of life, not the body of that life, which contains such souls or conscious beings. It only refers to such forms of life which may be built differently from ours, but have the fundamental essential of thinking things of their own. That is to possess a soul or a mind. So I hope that bit is answered, and that part of your question is answered, that the Holy Quran presents such a possibility. Scientists so far have not come across this idea as I have developed with the help of the Quran. All they can say is that some forms of life existed in extraterrestrial bodies which were preliminary in nature, but if given time, they could develop into things like human beings or like other animals. This is the only thing they can say with certainty, because life which they refer to, the possibility of life which they refer to, was created there or came into being there hundreds of thousands of light years away from us. And that means that that many years, human years, if you count them in human years, they were maybe, the life started billions of human years before our time. And the information was conveyed to us almost at the speed of light. So that is why it is very difficult for us to know what is the state of that life now today. Whether, if they believe in chances, the chances gave that life a chance to develop further or not. But the Holy Quran is very definite, very positive in this information. Not only that, but it also claims that when Allah so desires, He will bring the two forms of life together. There again, the language is very cautious. It does not say that Allah will bring the different forms of life together here on this earth. Nor does it say that Allah will bring life together physically. Through communication it is possible. And the distances involved reject the idea of physical contacts. So my inference is that according to this verse of the Quran which I referred to, life elsewhere will be able to communicate with conscious human beings here on this earth, or they will be able to communicate with them. That will be bringing together of the two. Through communication that can happen hundreds of years, light years across. So if they have sent a message to us or to other forms of life in the universe, it is possible that that message will reach us thousands or even a billion years from now on. But it is also possible that such forms of life were created not in the known stars, the stars known to the scientists today. That form of life may have been created much, much earlier and developed much earlier, evolved much earlier, so that the messages sent by them very long time ago could reach us today. And that is also a possibility which arises from the description of the Holy Quran. Right? Thank you.
A question from Mr. Dawood Khan from Hounslow.
Yes.
What is the best way Muslims can help the people in Iraq, apart from helping them militarily?
Well, it's not possible for us to help the people in Iraq directly, because whenever we render sensible advice to the Iraqi leadership, they reject that advice. And that I have been rendering throughout the beginning of that crisis. And we have sent such advices to their ambassadors, to the Iraqi leadership directly. We know the advice was delivered, but they do not care. If they had followed that advice, they should not have gone through that trauma which they went through, with which the entire population of Iraq is suffering. There was no need for the destruction of their weapons at all if they had behaved sensibly. So they were led to play into the hands of their enemies. They followed the advice in the beginning of American ambassador in Iraq, who encouraged them to attack Kuwait and told them positively that America will not object, we are neutral, which was wrong. It was a ruse adopted by Americans to make them come out of their shells and show their weapons and their intentions, etc. If they had not fallen into that plot, things which you see today should not have happened. Now it is no time for advising them, but still it is time for advising the Americans. And I'm so glad that here in England there are parliamentarians who are using very strong language of censure against Clintonism. And they're declaring him to be a danger to the world peace, a threat to the world peace, and a threat to the innocent people, not only in Iraq, but everywhere in the world. So only 2 or 3 days ago, I came across this piece of news item, and I was amazed that here there are bold people, bold enough to decry the wrong intentions of America and to snub them as brutal. So this is our voice. But our voice does not reach those ears, but the voice of the British people, the British intelligentsia and the British politicians may perhaps reach them. Whatever happens, I'm glad that the crisis is averted for the time being. But it may not be averted for a long time to come, because America does not want to leave them alone. Not because of any fear which they entertain, but because they know that this power, if it comes into its own, if its oil reserves are sold in the free market, that is going to create a real problem for America, American policies and American economy. So that is the reason I think they're going to persist in this policy of antagonism towards Iraq. They call it an antagonism towards Iraqi leader Saddam. It's wrong. They keep him alive to make the target, to make the entire people of Iraq suffer because of this leadership. And this is an excuse. Your own leader which is bringing down upon you such calamities. So it's a very clever game, but not wise game.
This question is from Mr. Keith Bowman. He's a retired lawyer from London.
Where is? Oh, there. Okay.
Do you see any way in which the gap can ever be bridged in Islam between the moderate and extremist groups, such as the Taliban?
I don't think so. It's not possible. The gap which has created these forces is widening. It cannot be bridged. Because once the destruction begins in a religious community, it always becomes worse, does not turn back to any betterment. That is the role of God to play. All religious communities, if they turn their back upon what they have falsified, I mean, the religion they have falsified, if they revert from that, begin to move towards the right religion at the source, this does not happen automatically. It has never happened automatically. If Allah so desires that such things happen, He can send someone or raise the consciousness among a truly God-fearing people that this is what we should do. So the world history of religion supports this. But in case of Muslim fundamentalists, we do not see any evidence of this ever happening in the near future. Maybe in a remote future from now, it's possible, but not now. You see, even Nawaz Sharif is becoming a Taliban leader now. You see? Imagine. It's an easy way to reach dictatorship. And in fact, all people want secure dictatorial powers where they emerge from democratic process or from any other process. All democratically elected leaders also want perpetuation of their hold on their people. But there are civilized people and uncivilized people. In the civilized people, you do not find any apparent deviation from the democratic principles. They do it privately. But in the uncivilized people like we suffer from, this always happens. They don't care. They are without shame. Please.
Question from Mr. Surjit Singh from Leamington Spa.
Yes, please.
His question is it not possible to please God without sacrifice of an animal? For example, during the pilgrimage.
Yes.
I feel animals are being ill-treated by doing sacrifice.
You see, if you do not sacrifice to God, but slaughter the animals all over the world anyway for human consumption, you sacrifice them for the sake of humans. And you are averse to sacrificing them for the sake of God. I don't see any logic in this. You know, in 1 year, in just Britain alone, animal life is sacrificed for the sake of human beings here in Britain. In far greater a number than it happens in the few days of sacrifice during our Hajj ceremony in Mecca. This is true. If you read your facts as presented by the people here, you'll be amazed that this is true. There, the life is sacrificed as a symbol which leads to God. That symbol leads to God, not the sacrificed animal directly. That symbol means that like you are slaughtering this animal, you must slaughter your own inner self. That is the symbol. And you see the pain in the eyes of the animal. You see what is happening to it. It is helpless. But you should do it on your own, to your own self, to achieve the pleasure of Allah. This is the significance of that sacrifice. While the animals are sacrificed all over the world without any significance, except for economic requirements, support of life. But that support of life can be achieved by turning to non-animal life, that is plants, sea plants, and everywhere in the world. You can get vegetarian form of diet, which is not abundant at present, but it can be made abundant if people turn to the vegetation in the sea, which is plentiful. It is inconceivable that that source will ever be exhausted. And now some companies are making proteins out of sea vegetations. So if they are pressed for this, they can do it. I mean, it's not an impossible task. Thank you.
This question is from Mr. Keith Millward. He's a student from Manchester.
Please.
And he's a Jehovah's Witness.
Yes.
His question is, if it was God's purpose for mankind to die and then go to heaven, why did he give us human bodies? Why didn't he create us as spirit creatures like the angels?
Because angels do not have a choice. And we have a choice. The difference is not between bodies and spirits. The difference is between a being having a choice or not having a choice. So, except humans, all other creations of Allah are deprived, or let's say, do not possess any choice. The laws of nature work as if automatically. They do not have any choice. If they had choices, no scientific progress could be possible. The machines which you are observing here, they could not be made if the laws had any choice to make on their own or haphazardly follow laws of chance. Then electricity would come and go and do this and that, and it may erupt the whole system itself. It may blow it up. So this is the difference. The difference is between beings with a choice and beings without a choice. So Allah gave humans a choice to do good or to do evil. And the ultimate deciding factor is that of the mind or of the soul. It is the ultimate entity which decides and not the body itself. The body, as deprived of that master, that is called soul in religious term, is nothing. It is not answerable for anything it does. So a madman can strike any person, can kill any man. He will not be held responsible by law. But if he has that mind which I am referring to, then his bodily actions will be answerable. If they are good, such a person should be rewarded. If they are bad, such a person should be punished. And that punishment will not be corporal according to Islam. Because body is not responsible. That inner being which is responsible, that will be either punished or rewarded. So that is why the hereafter. Thank you.
Another question from Mr. Milward. When does the Muslim calendar begin? What date precedes it, like in the Christian calendar, BC or AD?
You see, calendars are all untrustworthy. I don't see any calendar truly trustworthy, because even the Christian calendar should have begun much earlier by many years than actually it begins with. Because the birth of Jesus Christ is controversial. At least the scholars agree, they have a common consensus, that Jesus was not born in the year when it is supposed to have been born. At least 4 years before that, Jesus was born. And some say at least 8 years before. So calendars are not trustworthy as far as the beginning is concerned. Similarly, Islamic calendar has that problem. Any calendar which may begin with the year of birth of Rasulullah, the founder of Islam, is not fully trustworthy, because when he was not born as a prophet in the knowledge of people. He was just as any other child born to human beings. So people do not note the year or the month or the day when people are already born. At least they did not do it in the past ages. They do it now, they try to do it now, but they do it with the help of some existing calendar. And they make a mistake to the degree that calendar is wrong. But anyway, I'm talking of the time of the birth of Hazrat Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and also the time of the birth of Jesus Christ. It was not possible for any human being to consciously pinpoint the time of birth. So any calendar which began from there was not possible, was not trustworthy anyway. As far as the Hijrah calendar is concerned, all the Muslim scholars agree that it did not tally exactly with the time of Hijrah because of some difficulties which the makers of Islamic year confronted. So it was off the mark by a few months. So when we say after Hijrah, AH, it means that there is some adjustment to be made. And when we say before Hijrah, like AC, BC, that also means that some adjustment has to be made in that event occurring according to this problem of calendars. Yes, please.
From London. Do we remain conscious of our individuality after death? In other words, are we still aware of who we are?
It all depends on who you are. Some people are apparently aware, but actually are not. Some people are gaining greater awareness with the passage of life. And they're marching towards that awareness. But nobody is fully aware because there are hidden crevices within human inner being, within the recesses of human consciousness, let's say, which are not fully observed by man because of many factors. There are many areas of one's own self which man does not want to observe, to know really, because it will hurt. So he bypasses those areas. So there are many loopholes in human consciousness born out of many factors. Many people are mentally unable or educationally unable to introspect themselves. And there is a large number of human beings as such. So it is difficult to answer this question in generality, Mr. Clinton. No, I'm sorry, Clinton, I said. Ms. James Hilton, what was your full name? James Hilton, huh? Yes, Mr. Hilton. It's not possible to answer this question in generality. In fact, I have spoken on this subject repeatedly during many sermons of mine on Fridays. And I have tried to help Ahmadis to understand this phenomenon and this problem. But this is not a problem which they can avoid. They must know themselves. Without knowing yourself, you cannot know God. The more you know yourself, the better you know God. So that is the reason why it's unavoidable. But there is one way which will which will work as a guardian angel over you, which has been mentioned by the Holy Quran, that all your journeys should be guided with taqwa. Journeys within and journeys without. They should all be guided by taqwa. Taqwa means an inner fear of faltering, an inner fear of making a misstep, so that within yourself you have that guiding force. Deeply in your intentions you want to be rightly guided. And with that overwhelming thought, if you travel either way, inside you or outside, your conclusions will be much closer to truth. So this is the advice which I can render to all such people who ask me these questions, such questions. But otherwise, to talk in generalities is very difficult. Thank you.
Question from Mr. Tahir Archive from Huddersfield.
Yes, please.
Can you explain to me how a compassionate God can demand a practice like circumcision, where his creation is mutilated?
Because of compassion, he does it. Because the pain the children suffer in circumcision is much less than the pain of delivery of a child. The child goes through very great trauma during the delivery. So when he is circumcised as advised by the Quran in early days, he never remembers the pain. He is never conscious of that pain, nor does he remember the pain he suffered while he was being delivered. So Allah is compassionate. He does so because he, from out of other things, he wants human beings to have a greater health, a greater possibility of health. Because without circumcision, there is much more likelihood of people getting genetic diseases when they grow up. Now, if they are honest and true, it is not always necessary that their partner should also have been the same. So the genetic diseases are always created by the licenses which people take in this regard. So even if a person, a man, we're talking of man because circumcision only applies to men, not to women. A man has intercourse with his wife. If he has circumcision, he will have less chances of suffering from genetical diseases of the wife than otherwise. And this is a fact which the modern allopathic doctors fully support. They say this is true, that in circumcision, the opening at the mouth is much less and more difficult to be made automatically. It is made when there is an ejection. But when you are without circumcision, you leave yourself to that chance openly. So I think that is all I can say on this subject, because there are also ladies present here, you know. This is my limitation. Thank you.
Question from Mr. Abdul Rashid from Manchester. He's a businessman.
Yes.
His question is, what is the Jamaat's position in relation to taking and receiving of interest from banks, especially in relation to obtaining a mortgage for a house?
You see, Jamaat's opinion on this has been expressed by me many times before, but briefly I'll repeat. You know, we live in a system, financial system of the world, which is based on usury. And it is impossible for any individual to avoid a brush with usury or interest money altogether. It's not possible. The best he can do is to guard him against the evil influences of a system based on interest. And that is what advised Ahmadis all over. But the problem is manifold. The fact is that what they call the deals, which they call are based on interest, etc., they are not always based on interest. They're named as such, but when you come to the actual conditions between the two parties, X party and the bank, the actual deal is different from those deals which are based on interest. And sometimes, like in many Muslim countries, they call it a profit. But the conditions indicate that what they call a profit is not a profit, it is an interest. So that is why I advise the Jamaat to always send the conditions of that deal with any bank or any individual which they are proposing to make. The Jamaat ulama will study them carefully and advise such a person whether legally, according to Islam, he should participate in, should undertake that economic venture or not. Now, in case of mortgages, for instance, it is not as openly a case of interest as people generally think. When you go for a house on mortgage, what you do is that the house is not possessed by you. It remains to be the possession of that company which has made it possible for you to take it. So when you begin to use it, then what you are paying is your rent, in fact. You see, that is the difference. So you have to analyze the whole deal very minutely. You're paying your rent because if it were not rent, you should have possessed it piecemeal, but you don't do it. If you fail to pay all the mortgage, even if a few £1,000 are left, they can expel you from the house and take over the house. That means that you never were the proprietor of that house. You're only given an impression as though you were the proprietor of that house. And what you were paying was not interest, but the rental of that house. And I have worked it out that many times the rental money is less than the interest you might have paid. So it is an advantage from which I cannot deprive Ahmadis here. But I always advise them to have only one such house. They should not make it their business, because then their greed for money would lead them to many other false things as well. Thank you.
Another question from Mr. Abdul Rashid.
Yes, please.
This relates to ablution, wuzu. He says, can you explain in relation to ablution in cold weather, whether washing the feet is necessary or can masa be performed?
You see, in cold weather, it all depends on where you live. In England, they provide you with all the facilities, are warm water available day and night. But even in Arabia, where the Quran was revealed, at that time, during the winter, the cold was far worse than it normally occurs in many cold countries. You see, at times in Arabia, the cold is so severe that any water left outside will freeze. So they have to keep the water warm within the house, but the warm is a comparative word, relative word. By warm, they mean it's very cold. So yet they perform their wuzu all right. I have done it myself. In England, I have been a student here in 1955, 57, till 57. And in those days, the money which was given to us by our father was not enough to keep myself fully warm in my room. And even in the common bath, I had always to put 6 pence in the machine to warm the water, which I avoided because I could have a little meal out of that 6 pence in those days. So sometimes I took cold bath in extremely chilly weather with chilly water, and I felt always better and warmer after it. Well, you can try it yourself. So to avoid cleaning yourself with cold water is not a good policy. The alternative is filth, which always gathers, and sometimes gather far more in the feet of many people. They smell out of whatever the feet exude. So it's always better to wash the feet as many times as possible. Thank you.
This is another question from Mr. Surjit Singh from Leamington Spa.
Yes.
His question is, others do not allow Sikhs and others to enter their mosques, but Ahmadis do.
Yes.
Why is it so? Is there any difference of religious teachings?
Yes, because the Holy Quran says that mosques are created for Allah. Anyone who believes in Allah, he can go there. Even if Sikhs believe in the unity of God, so they are very close to Muslims. If any Muslim has a right to go to a mosque, Sikhs do possess that right. Nobody can prevent them. So those who try to prevent you from entering their mosque, ask them. Why? As far as we are concerned, we are following a policy which is based exactly on the Quranic injunctions. Thank you.
This question from Mr. Mustafa Aryan. He is from Albania.
Yes. We met before many times, haven't we? Yes.
There were 72 sects, and now we also have the Ahmadiyya sect. What difference has it made in the Islamic world? And what is the importance of the Ahmadiyya sect and why?
Ahmadiyya is not a sect, because when you call it a sect, it will add to the division. But Ahmadiyya is a Jamaat. That's why we call it a Jamaat. And that is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he predicted the advent of the promised Messiah or the Mahdi, he used the same words, that will be a Jamaat, not a sect. Because the word sect has a wrong connotation. But the word Jamaat means united and together. So the Jamaat Ahmadiyya provides that opportunity to all the people of Islam, whichever sect they have been belonging to come and join a religious community which is united, which has become a Jamaat. And this is true everywhere. People who become Ahmadis from Great Britain, they are a part and parcel of the Jamaat as much as Ahmadis from Bosnia, from Yugoslavia, from anywhere in the world, from Africa, from China, etc. And this unity is fact indicates there being a Jamaat. And Islam is a religion of unity. It is impossible to call towards the unity of Allah without you being united yourself. So that is the reason why Ahmadiyya was essential. It's not an option. It had to be created like it is created, so that the other Muslims were offered an opportunity to gather under the banner of Ahmadiyyat, which we believe to be true Islam. Thank you.
Question from Anila Mustafa. who's also from Albania.
Yes. Where is Anila? Yes, please.
When was the Ahmadiyya mission started in Albania, and how many Albanians are Ahmadis?
In fact, Ahmadiyya mission was started in Albania before the Second World War. And there were many Albanian Ahmadis at the time whose graves in their graveyards mention this, that they were Ahmadi Muslims. So because of the war, the communication between the center and the Albanian Ahmadis was severed and disrupted so much that after the war, when we looked at Albania, it was completely under the clutches of a communist rule, which would not permit the preaching of religion to Albanians in any form from anywhere. So that is why you see a big gap between then and now. But ever since we have restarted the effort, I must inform you, and it's a glad tidings for you, that Ahmadiyyat is spreading among Albanian Muslims much faster than among any other Muslim European entity. Albanians are paying their attention to Ahmadiyyat with much more seriousness. There is something in their character which is so beautiful. They not only pay serious attention, but when they become Ahmadis, they become practicing Ahmadis, practicing Muslims. And they give their subscriptions and they begin to say namaz regularly. They begin to learn Islam for Ahmadi books, etc., etc. So I think that answer should cover everything you wanted to ask. Does that? Thank you.
This is the final question.
Yes.
It's from Mr. Brendan Corns from Huddersfield.
Yes.
His question is, as a man, how do you, Hazur, feel with your spiritual progress? Are you happy with your personal progress, or are you still learning?
You see, there is this question is very difficult to answer, in fact, because I know myself, I feel I know myself. It is very difficult to say that I am happy with the spiritual progress, because more I know myself, more I know of the crevices within me, which have not yet been reached by that light. Outwardly, people can see, I'm all right. I'm performing my religious duties absolutely perfectly. To the foreign eyes, this may be the case. But as in the answer to my previous question, I have informed everybody that you should be the best judge of yourself. And you can only be the best judge if you're honest in that approach and attitude. So only this much I hope I can claim, that I'm honest in my journey. I hope and claim that I'm honest in my journey because of response from Allah towards my efforts. He would never come closer to me if I was moving away from Him. So He's always getting closer to me because I am moving towards Him. And that I do because I am moving within myself, into my own self. And there, everywhere I find God to be present where I discover myself. I mean, if He were not present, I make room for Him. I clean myself so that He can call it His home. Thank you.
That's it.
Yes? So, what time would you serve food?
So we can be ready in about 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
So, the prayer time begins at 7:15. Half past 7, huh? I mean, in about a quarter hour.
That's right.
So, what do you suggest? shall I come on time?
I would suggest it is nearly the time of Maghrib. So if we can have
Isha.
So if we can have Isha in about 10 minutes,
Yes.
and then we can start the meal.
I mean, that will be more convenient for you and everybody.
I think so, sir.
Well and good for me. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.